Do you want to record, Lori?
Yeah,
You're already,
I have it
you're
recording.
already recording. Excellent work.
Okay, so I'll do like this, and then we can take a pause, and then I'll begin.
Yeah, we don't have our countdown.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. Today, we are digging into a practical example of how schools and districts can communicate big changes with families and the community about reading science.
Yeah, and we have someone who is doing that work every day in a school. So we have Crystal Lenhart, who is a reading specialist at Bighorn Elementary in Wyoming. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to be here and talk to you ladies.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear more.
Your work is so important. And we came across it and I just thought, wow, this is so professional, so important that the way that you're communicating with families, with the community about this important transition and this important change. So I'm hoping you could start us off by just sharing what, this is not a simple question.
Like start off easy.
In a nutshell, what does it take to like really transform a school from balanced literacy to structured literacy?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? And I know it's the question that tons of schools and educators are asking all across the country because it's the question of our time, I think, right now. And so, gosh, I think there's several things in order to really transform a school. Obviously, you have to have teachers on board, teachers that are educated in in reading science, basically. And that takes a lot of, it takes a lot of relationship building. It takes a lot of, knowing the science and being able to, bring teachers along in that. So, I mean, I would say relationships and appealing to teachers' professionalism is a large part of that. So we got to be educated on what needs to happen. And then, I mean, there's other things to truly be successful in transforming a school, I think, is that we're going to jump in all the way sort of attitude. That's what worked for us in adopting curriculum that aligns, continuing with professional development, those types of things, getting structures and systems in place so that you really can make the changes, and then, building that community and parent support too. So it's a lot to do, but I think our message from Bighorn Elementary is that you can do it, but you kind of got to jump in and do it. You got to go all in.
I was going to say, I think that's a really important point because I hear some folks who say, well, we're going to keep doing balanced literacy, but we'll add this in, or we'll make this one change. And I just find like it could get so messy and confusing for everybody, students, teachers, parents. like, wait, what are we doing?
What I think about that as an analogy too. Like if you're like, hey, I need to get healthier. I need to have heart health, and I need to reduce the amount of saturated fats that I'm eating. But instead of just saying like, okay, I'm going to like dramatically reduce that, right? That's not going, I'm going to do that like over time. So I'll just like maybe eat a bite less of a burger today. And like you're eating that for every meal. You're not going to see any kind of change until you get to the point where you're all in on that change, right? Where you're maybe eating a small amount and the rest of what you're consuming is really healthy stuff or really good stuff, right? So that I kind of think of it like it doesn't make so much of no sense to me to take that approach of like we're just going to do a little bit. So I love that you all took this like all in approach and that you really focused on tier 1.
Yeah, we did. Initially, that was our main focus, is that we're going to transform tier 1 instruction. We are going to line up with the science at this stage in our journey, which is about like our 3rd year, third, fourth year in, we are focusing on tier 2, tier 3. But tier 1, of course, is the priority at the beginning. And that's what we had to do. We took we didn't take much time, a little bit of time to kind of bring people on board and read a lot of articles and have a lot of discussions. But then we jumped in that following year. I would say kind of halfway through the first year, we brought on, like, kindergarten, first grade started making those changes about mid-year. But then the second year is when, in the summer, I wrote that parent letter that has been used kind of around the country, around the world even, to say things are going to be different at our school this coming year. So.
Yeah, so I think we should talk about that letter that you wrote, because that's what brought us to you. So you wrote something called How We Teach Reading at Bighorn Elementary that was for parents, right? That was the audience?
Yeah, it was. That was the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And we love it. So can you tell us some more about the purpose and what's in it and what you would suggest for other schools?
Yeah. Is my automatic lights. There we go.
That's how you know we're in a school building with you.
Yeah.
I love the automatic lights.
Yeah.
Every educator we've ever interviewed does this like many times during a podcast.
Yeah. And we actually had a power outage last night, so bells have been randomly ringing. No. That could happen. So yeah, I think as the way this sort of evolved was I was planning as reading specialist and now literacy coach, I was planning PD to jumpstart the year for our staff. And they were, pretty much on board, and we had adopted new curriculum, new resources for our curriculum. And so we knew that we were kicking off the year differently. And we had been a Fountain Pinnell school. We had parents that were always asking about those levels. We even had parents that would post on Facebook, my kid's a level G now, and so there was a lot of history with that. And that was how we had communicated progress, was through those F&P levels. And so we just knew that we're doing things completely different because we totally abandoned that system of assessment as we kicked off, and we needed to explain to parents. And so I kind of wrote out this parent letter that kind of hit almost all the areas about structured literacy instruction, and what we would be doing, and also kind of laid out what we would not be doing anymore. And I think that clarity and sort of that just, okay, this is the way it is, and this is what we're not going to do and why we're not going to do it, is what resounded with a lot of people across the country, of being that sort of explicit with our, instruction to parents that here's what it is and here's what it's not, because they were used to a completely different system.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you just took that very simple approach. Here's what it is, here's what it's not. And I'm just like looking at the first page of it, and what resonates with me is that you define the science of reading, so everyone is grounded in a clear definition of it. And then I love your header, when we know better, we do better. And it's situating yourself in the data for how reading scores have remained stagnant and how you're going to do better with the research that you have at hand. So kudos to that, to you there. Do you want me to open it up now? I know if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. If you're listening, we have it linked in the show notes, so you can pull it up. But it's a super, super back to school resource, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if as a way to even guide schools in the things that do need to change, and then obviously to communicate them. So it is a good resource, back to school resource. Just everything from, our emphasis is now on acquiring the code for kids. That's what we want to do. We want to give them the ability to be automatic and fluent with accessing the letters on the page, so that we can, as quickly as we can, get to the deep meaning and the comprehension, and really get into, literature and informational text and really understand it, because they are proficient decoders. So that was a big shift. Abandoning that 3 queuing system, we were just very upfront about that.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm looking at your assessments portion, and I'm just thinking, based on the example that you gave earlier, I'm a parent and my child was given a level M, making it up. And I'm thinking, well, this level M seems so concrete. I know where they are within the alphabetical letters. As a parent, I can wrap my brain around going from A to Z. And now the assessments look like oral reading fluency rates. I don't know what that is as a parent. And then there's other diagnostic assessments. What can you say more about, like, what were parents' reactions to this, and how did you help them understand?
Right. I think we did have an advantage in that we had been using universal screening with oral reading fluency in the past. In addition, it was interesting how those scores did not match up. It was like, you can really, have kids that fly up in F&P levels, when the reality of where they are with, their actual oral reading fluency can be, not showing the same thing. Oh, we don't have all these advanced readers that we thought we did. So our parents were accustomed to seeing that data. We have gotten a lot. Well, I think that they are now used to using that type of data, as this is a measurement that tells us basically how easy, how difficult reading is in general for a kid of your age, your child's age and grade. And then we gather that diagnostic data, and are showing them the specifics of that. So one change that we've made recently is we moved our parent-teacher conference dates to coincide with all this data gathering. So where traditionally it used to be, like October and March, we've moved that to, we have parent-teacher conferences sort of as a, we're going to communicate all the data and set goals. So we do that maybe the 3rd week of school, once we've kind of gathered all that information. And then again, like right now, after we've done some mid-year, we would have done it like sooner in January, but we have an interim of our state assessment that comes a little later. So anyways, so we've changed that practice as well. So now we're communicating really some really meaningful data to our parents, and any child that's being progress monitored through those platforms. Like we use Ames Web, it could be Acadience or whatever. Any progress monitoring data is, shared with parents regularly. So I feel like they have a better picture really of where their kid is now, and especially coupled with, we're very specific. We've gotten really good at being specific about where kids are through our like MTSS system of, diagnosing where they're at, checking the progress, so I feel like we are giving parents much more specific data than we used to.
That's helpful. I'm wondering, Crystal, if you can, if someone was looking at this quickly and just looking at through the headings, some of these are things that you all started doing or were focused on, and others are things that you all stopped doing or were getting rid of.
Right.
Can you just talk through them real quick? Like what were things that were new to the district, and what were things that you all had been doing that you were then not doing anymore?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I would say that first heading, the code emphasis in the primary grades, was something that we were not really doing, but we had adopted foundations back in like 2017. So we were kind of, better than some schools in offering some phonics instruction, but we didn't understand that emphasis. So it was, you know, it was more random, maybe not enough time, but it was still there. But so switching that emphasis was definitely new, and the phonics, the explicit systematic phonics instruction. So just we gained that understanding of how that needs to be emphasized rather than hit somewhat randomly in using only those other approaches. I would say understanding the importance of early intervention was new somewhat too. You know, I feel like teachers in general know that, but we truly value, even we have a Kinder Boost program and we have preschool, and we truly have understood the importance of developing oral language and seeing those very early signs of reading difficulty. So that is something that comes with understanding the science of reading. So that's also it's something that we took on. Phonemic awareness is something that we did in a very limited way before. I used to teach kindergarten, and I remember that it would be something that would supposed to be assessed in the fall, like in the first quarter. It was like, you know, oh, they can segment, they can blend. It was very basic, and it was not emphasized. So that is something that we really shifted, and we do try to bring all of our kids to sort of that advanced phonemic proficiency.
Crystal, can I jump in and just read a sentence that I love here under that phonemic awareness part? You said students in the intermediate grades may need to practice these skills until they have firmed up this foundation of reading. Don't be surprised if you have a 3rd through 5th grader who will be working on phonemic awareness. This is an area that research has indicated is hugely important. I love that you're just outlining that as a new norm for families and caregivers to expect. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. This is a great thing. We're going to help your child be a better reader.
Exactly. Yeah. And if that foundation is not there, then I mean, everything gets stalled out if they're not able to get to the internal structure of words. So yeah, that became a new practice of, you know, if we have kids in those upper grades and they're showing that they're not comprehending, then we look at, oh, are they fluent? Well, if they're not reaching their fluency goals, then another like aha light bulb was, wait, you don't just automatically practice fluency, you know, as in going faster or improving that rate. It's like, no, let's diagnose and figure out, are there word recognition difficulties? That's where we really got down there, and then figured out, well, a lot of these kids that are not proficient in those upper grades actually don't have phonemic awareness. So that was something that was definitely new. The decodable readers, obviously, that was a big change. With our assessments, we used to do that, the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system. We just stopped that. We use our universal screening diagnostic data. So that has very much changed. Quit using the leveled readers. We did revamp our leveled library into a topic library. So that was sort of a job that some of our, well, there was a team of us, and I know our paraprofessionals were a big part of helping us you know, revamp the library. So we may have
examples of that, Crystal. We get a lot of questions about this.
We get a ton of questions about this. I almost want to
like,
can I read a part of this first and then you give an example? Okay. Maybe I give you a moment to think. Actually, I'm just going to read the whole thing. Your child will not be assigned a reading level that corresponds to a letter of the alphabet. They will work with a variety of text. Some texts may address specific phonics needs. Some may be at grade level to build knowledge that is pertinent to their grade level. Some may be interest-based. Some will be at a determined level for fluency practice, but they will not be confined to a certain level. Kindergarten and first grade students will not bring home books with pattern sentences that are easily memorized. Love that you outlined all of that right there, like addressed every single grade level, what we had seen in the past, and now here comes new things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because that's how we're fortunate to have a walk to read model in play at our school, which to me is key. It's will help you so much. So that those walk to read groups used to be very much focused on what level they were at, and you would just go through the levels. Now it's much more specific to their need. Obviously in our grades, where they're really taking on the code, most of it, there goes the lights again. Most of it is centered around decodable text and advancing through a phonics scope and sequence. But we have some high flyers in those grades that can get into authentic text and begin to do some, building their fluency and focusing on some other things. And then as we were talking about the leveled library, so that became a topic library. For example, we have through the leveled library, we found our books on, say, dinosaurs, right? So now we have a wide section of dinosaur books that would go from very simple books. It kind of, because there is a place for a child practicing at, the level that is, a good instructional level for them, just as in what they are able to access. Not to be confused with, we want them all accessing grade level text in their tier 1. So we have back to the library, it's all sectioned off in these levels, or not levels, topics, and using those books. I will say though that those early, really predictable texts, like say up through whatever D, E, F, we just don't use those. We just don't have children practice with that predictable. Can
you give an example of that patterned text? I think like Melissa and I are aware of some of the patterns, but Melissa, if you can think of an example, I'm trying to think of one too.
Well, like when kids are very first being exposed to those patterns, like say a level B or something, I can see the, butterfly, I can see the motorcycle, I can see the, that's simplified, but it's
usually with a picture that tells you what the thing is.
What the word is.
Yeah, they don't know how to decode the word butterflies, or they don't know how to decode motorcycles, so they're simply developing some bad habits from the very beginning. So we don't use that predictable, the texts that are very predictable like that at all. So those aren't in there. But once they're beyond that, then if a teacher has a need for a topic, that's how we've transformed our leveled library. But we've also built a very nice library of decodable text. And that's what we mostly, in those early grades are using, decodable text. And we like actually the sheets of paper that they can mark up, and kids use a binder of passages. So
yeah. Okay, well, let's keep going here. We have some other practices. I'm thinking of this as like a keep, stop, start sheet.
Yeah. So we definitely have abandoned the 3 cueing system. No, absolutely no guessing. We're working with understanding the code and understanding the multiple ways to spell sounds, really trying to go, that speech to print. So absolutely, we're not using the 3 cueing system. And while we have changed guided reading practices. And this I think did sort of, maybe there were some schools that didn't appreciate like, we are distancing ourselves from the term guided reading, just because that's kind of is associated with the 3 cueing system. So
and leveling.
Yeah. So we changed that. We didn't call it guided reading anymore. It's just our walk to read groups, where kids are either progressing through a phonics scope and sequence, or there may be other needs that are addressed, or enrichment. So we changed that. The knowledge building and vocabulary emphasis. This is basically, so much of it was new learning and truly understanding the science of reading, because we did completely, grab onto the fact that the science of reading is not just decoding. It's absolutely the upper strands of the reading rope as well. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just as important part of it. So, we knew that we wanted to have materials that would build knowledge. And so that's where we adopted Amplify CKLA for our sort of primary grades, and then Wit and Wisdom for 4th and 5th. And really, those have worked so beautifully for us. I think that, like, our 4th and 5th graders, the amount of writing and deep thinking that they do within Wit and Wisdom has been, I mean, that's something that we can see on our data. Our state assessment scores have really gone up for 4th and 5th grade. And then just the solid structured literacy approach of Amplify CKLA, we'd like the skills strand in that. And so it's worked fine for us to kind of have that split of the two materials. But that was huge.
Say, whatever works for your school and your district, right? Like, it's
right.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and that's been a part that there's just kind of shifting to more away from just the leveled readers has boosted kids' enthusiasm about reading. It really has been a positive all the way around. So, and then comprehension, I mean, just having that understanding that, I mean, comprehension is an outcome of everything else that we're doing. And we have switched in that, teaching those strategies over and over and over again has shifted into, we're going to dive deep into text, build that knowledge. So comprehension, I would say has not been as dramatic of changes, because there was a lot of, great things that we were doing with comprehension before, but I think the shift is in understanding that we're not going to necessarily approach it in the same way of, we're going to work on these strategies.
Sure, like isolated skills.
Yeah. And having a really good resource such as like Wit and Wisdom to dive in, I mean, that has truly helped a lot. So that's good. And now we're kind of at the point where we're wanting to dive in a little further into writing. So we're wanting to look at the SRSD, kind of do some, diving into what that would take, because we know we're kind of at that point. There's always more to learn, there's always more to tweak and to improve at. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
Well, it's very exciting, and we're so grateful that you shared this with us. Melissa, is there anything else that you would like to know from Crystal?
I think I would just like a wrap up of like what the response was when people got this in their hands. Did you get any feedback? Did you feel like there was less confusion about the shifts that were happening?
Yeah, I think honestly, maybe it was super helpful that it was spelled out very, explicitly for them, because our, our reaction from parents has been almost all positive.
That's huge.
Yeah, it
for
really
such a
is.
big shift. It is.
Yeah, and parents begin to understand, that the way, even most parents of this sort of age group with kids in elementary school were taught very much whole language, or balanced literacy. And so when they begin to understand the code and what their kids are doing, they're kind of like, wow, this makes sense. And so we have really not had pushback from our community. This first year we had this parent letter, and then we did host specific parent nights kind of per grade level to explain in person as well how things were going to look differently. And really just, I think because we had really open communication about it, we haven't had a negative pushback from parents, wanting another approach. So
makes sense. That's what I would hope would come from this.
Yeah. That's what we.
I always think like high quality curriculum is true transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so like, it'd be so much easier as a parent to receive this information in this way. And then of course you're probably sharing like the parent tip sheets, and the students' writing is coming home, and the parents are able to see all that. And also they're able to talk with their child as they're taking a walk or at dinner or wherever they are. Hey, I learned about this in school. And their child's able to share knowledge and probably use vocabulary that they have not been able to use with a previous approach. So I think there's so many great things that kind of surround the idea of like sharing this information. It's like almost like the child lifts up the good stuff too, by sharing all of these great things that they're learning in school. I know kids they love learning about stuff. And
yes,
it's exciting.
Yeah, we did have some stories of that, of where parents were appreciating that, now they had things to talk about, like, what are you learning in school? And they're actually, can tell them that they're learning about, knowledge, things like that. I know in one instance we had a group of kids that left for a celebration. It was like a reading celebration. So a bunch of them left and went on this little field trip, and they had missed the knowledge strand. So they come back in from the celebration field trip, like, what did we miss? What did we miss? So
Aww.
that type of excitement for learning, they still, they were having fun on their field trip, but they still were a little worried about what they were missing back in the classroom. So that was kind of a cool story too.
Yeah. What's better than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, we're super grateful that you took some time to talk with us today and just share with our listeners how they can prepare their school communities for shifts that they might be making or maybe have already made. And we're just going to stamp those with something really great. Like this, I mean, it's beautiful, by the way, like this beautiful document that helps understand, like, what are we stopping? What are we starting? And maybe we're keeping something with a twist, So thank you for sharing all of these great examples and this resource for everyone to check out.
You bet. And it's just kind of my passion to see schools transform, because it matters. It matters deeply for kids' lives to be able to read proficiently. It makes a difference. So I'm truly just very, very motivated, very passionate about seeing schools make this type of change, because it needs to happen. Obviously, it needs to happen across the country. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much for all your good work.
You bet. It was great visiting with you guys.